Hello and welcome to this Filbert Flies review. For the first time I'll be taking a look at two add-ons in this review, Singapore Changi Airport and Singapore Downtown, both by CloudSurf Asia Simulations. I'll be spending 90% of the time looking at the airport, but given how nicely the Downtown add-on complements the airport scenery, I thought it would be silly not to take a little look at this too. We're currently on approach to runway 02 left at Changi, and as always I'm starting with an approach so that you can have a good look at the surrounding area and gauge the performance of the add-ons on my system. My system specs and current graphics settings can be found in the description down below, just click show more to see them. I'll leave you to watch the approach in peace now, and I'll speak to you again once I've parked the aircraft up at a gate. We'll then have a good look around the airport and the Downtown add-on in different weather and lighting conditions. Welcome to Changi Airport, and we will start by having a look at the jetway connecting. We're parked up here on gate C23. And that was a very nice job, I think you'll agree. Custom jetway, and the jetway hood connects to the aircraft pretty near perfectly. Let's move on to having a look at some of the modelling and the texturing, starting with the jetway itself. And I have to say, I'm pretty impressed with this. The textures look very, very crisp. We've got nice crisp HSBC advertising on the side. We've got a nice amount of detail on the roof. And all in all, it looks very, very good. The upper parts of the jetway feature tinted transparent glass. And if we go inside, you will notice that the glass maintains its tint and its reflectiveness from both sides, which is very nice to see. We'll move on to the terminal building now, and this is a huge airport, so I'm not going to be able to show you every inch of it, but I will show you enough to give you a good flavour of what you can expect from this scenery. So you'll notice that the glass windows are not transparent and we don't have interior modelling yet, but this is something that the developers are looking at implementing later. It's not a promise, but it's something they're going to have a go at. That said, the textures used for the opaque windows look really very nice indeed. They give a convincing impression of a terminal interior, and they reflect the light very, very nicely. The textures above and below the windows are very nicely detailed. We've got a good amount of weathering, and they're nice and crisp. You have to get very, very close indeed to notice any blurriness whatsoever. At ground level, we've got a really nice amount of detail. These roller shutters and these doors are very, very crisp, and they really look the part. A good amount of detail has been included on the roof, such as these air conditioning units, and I really like the attention to detail on this platform that they're sitting on. It looks very, very nicely weathered and very realistic. The roof textures themselves are very good as well. We've got little cracks and imperfections, and while these textures aren't quite as sharp as those on the sides of the terminal, they're plenty sharp enough in my view, and they look really very nice. Here we have part of the Terminal 2 building around the echo gates, and once again the modelling and texturing is very nicely done, including the modelling and texturing of this airport sign on the roof, which looks really very nice indeed. The level of detail on the roof continues to impress, and up here you see an animated train, which is one of the many nice little features that have been included. This is one of the piers that extends out from Terminal 2, and once again I'm very impressed with the opaque window textures. They're nicely reflective and they're not too repetitive. You'll notice here that the jetway appears to have no transparent glass, but in fact it is transparent, it's just very, very heavily tinted. As we get closer you will be able to see the doorway up here which goes into the main terminal, and once again if we go inside you'll see that we have an interior modelled, which is nice. One of the things that makes this airport such an interesting place to fly to is the variety of architecture, and this is an example of another type of building. This is the southern part of Terminal 2. Once again, I'm really impressed with the attention to detail and the quality of the modelling and texturing. Here's Terminal 4, and once again I can't really find anything to complain about. It looks great. Just look at the detailing on this staircase here. This is the West Cargo Apron and the associated terminal buildings, and these buildings look every bit as good as the passenger terminals do. Really impressive work. CloudSurf Asia have clearly put a lot of effort into the landside areas of this airport as well. This is the entrance to Terminal 1, and you can see we've got some fantastic texture work and some really nice details like these bollards and the entrance signs. Here's the entrance to Terminal 2 with an absolutely fantastic glass canopy. Here's an incredibly nicely modelled Crowne Plaza hotel. And just to the right of it is the airport's pièce de résistance, the famous jewel, which once again has been incredibly well modelled and textured. And as we go inside, you will see that it even has a modelled interior. Isn't this just spectacular? And look, the little train goes right through the middle of it, which I think is incredibly cool. But anyway, I'm conscious that I'm getting a little bit carried away with the landside details, and there are plenty of you that think this is a complete waste of time. So we'll move back over to the airside and have a look at some of the ground textures. But before we do, have a quick look at the tower, which is also looking fantastic. The ground textures at this airport are nice and crisp. From an aircraft cockpit they look fantastic, and even when you get down low in the drone they still look really sharp. The materials used and their colours match the real airport pretty closely. Not perfectly, but closely enough in my opinion. The ground markings look very, very good. If I was being super picky, I'd say they're possibly slightly too bright in places. They could do with a bit more dirt and grime. And I'd also say that I'd like to see a little bit more smoothing around the corners. You can see in particular that these taxiway edge lines are slightly jagged, but this is really, really nitpicking. There's a good amount of rubber marking around taxiway centre lines, but in general the airport just looks a tiny bit too clean, and I'd like to see a little bit more random patches of dirt and grime around the place. The runways in general look pretty good. The markings appear to be accurate, and there's a good amount of rubber around the touchdown zones. The textures themselves differ from runway to runway, just as they do at the real airport. So we'll start by having a look at these ones on runway 2 left, and you can see they are again pretty crisp. Runway 2 centre looks pretty similar. And runway 2 right looks a bit different, but every bit as good, in my opinion. With the exception of the fact that we do have a few little splodges from the default satellite textures bleeding in, and the fact that they've missed the R out from the runway numbers. So that's something that could use a little bit of attention. While we're over at the eastern side of the airport, it is worth pointing out that the default ground textures here don't look all that great. They are a little bit on the blurry side. And also, the taxiway centre lines have a few gaps in them and a few other errors here and there. So this is definitely a part of the airport that could do with a little bit more work, in my opinion. The grassy areas in between the runways and taxiways look pretty good, as do the taxiway signs, which have been very nicely modelled. A good amount of ground clutter has been included in the scenery, which adds a little bit of life to the airport, and it's nice to see the vehicles and the containers, etc. wearing appropriate liveries and branding. There are no static aircraft taking up any of the parking at the terminals, but we do have a large number of scoot planes parked up on these remote stands. Now, as you know by now, I would love the option to turn statics on or off, but in the absence of that, I think this is quite a nice compromise. So you won't have issues parking if you're flying on VATSIM, but you will see a few aircraft around as you taxi around the airport. The night lighting is really very good indeed. These downlighters look very realistic, as do the pools of light that they cast on the apron. Although we're reliant on flat, opaque window textures as opposed to having a lit terminal interior, the ones that the developers have used here do create a pretty good impression of light emanating from within. I'm impressed. The Jewel looks absolutely spectacular by night, and the same is true of all of the landside terminal entrances. The taxiway and runway lighting across most of the airport looks very good indeed. But unfortunately, over on the eastern edge, none of the taxiways are lit at all. The airport looks great in the rain, with the ground textures supporting the default reflections and puddles very nicely. We do have a little bit of popping with the transparent glass, which is an issue that every airport suffers with and is something that Asobo will need to look into, I think. And we also have a little bit of popping of the vegetation, as you will notice over here. But these are very minor issues, and overall, I can't find much to complain about. Time now to have a little look at the Singapore Downtown add-on, which, as I said at the beginning, is a separate purchase, but it obviously goes very nicely with the airport. So this is the Singapore Indoor Stadium, which looks very nice. Good modelling, good texturing. Here we have Keppel Harbour, which looks very, very nice, and is very detailed, even down to appropriate logos on the shipping containers. And here we have Singapore Downtown itself. And again, the quality on these models is really very high. And you may well have noticed during our approach that a number of ships have been included, so let's take a closer look at one of these. Pretty good, isn't it? The incredible boat-shaped Sky Park observation deck has been modelled, and some details have been added to the Sky Park itself. The Marina Barrage has been included, and it looks to me that the Marina Bay Golf Course has had a little bit of work done on it as well. The only thing in this add-on that stands out as a negative to me is the fact that none of the waterfront elevation issues have been sorted out. So you'll notice a variety of piers and other things protruding into the water that remain pixelated satellite images that don't protrude at all. But overall, I think they've done a pretty good job, and the city to me looks fantastic both by day and by night. Before I wrap this video up, I want to run through what the developers have planned for the future of their Changi Airport scenery, according to their website. As I mentioned earlier, they're planning to have a go at some terminal interior modelling, but whether they include this or not will depend on how much of a performance impact it has. This is fair enough, it's a huge airport that currently performs very well, so it wouldn't be worth messing that up for some additional eye candy. They also intend to add more objects to the airport and to improve the buildings surrounding it, and they want to add animated cars and buses to the airport boulevard. But what do I think of the airport in its current state? Well, quite frankly, it has blown me away. On their Facebook page, CloudSurf Asia referred to the current release as an open beta, and while there are one or two things that need more work, in my opinion, they're being unfair to themselves by giving it this label. Let's get the negatives out the way first. Broadly speaking, I'd say that the eastern side of the airport needs more work. Runway 2 right was missing the R, and in the opposite direction, the L is missing from runway 20 left. There are some satellite imagery artifacts bleeding through, the taxiways are unlit, and the taxiway centerlines have gaps in them. So for this part of the airport, the open beta label is probably fair. It's a very different story for the bulk of the airport though. The things I like are probably too numerous to mention in a conclusion, but I'll have a go anyway. The modelling and texturing is first class. The night lighting is very realistic, and the attention to detail is breathtaking. From air conditioners on roofs to jetway interiors, the exceptional landside terminal entrances, the correctly liveried ground vehicles and other clutter, the animated Skytrain, and the stunning interior of the Jewel. It's all just really, really impressive stuff. And all of this for about €12 at the time of recording, if you buy it through Orbex Direct. As for the Singapore Downtown add-on, well, I'm no expert on cityscape add-ons, but it looked pretty good to me. The buildings that were included were all modelled and textured to a very high standard, and the only thing I was disappointed by was that they hadn't done any work on the waterfront to bring the various piers and jetties out of the sea. It's worth bearing in mind that Orbex are working on their own Landmarks Singapore City Pack. I have no idea whether it will be better or worse. Suffice to say, if you're going to buy CloudSurf Asia's Changi Airport and you have a little bit of cash left over, I think that buying their Singapore Downtown pack to go with it would be a pretty good investment. I hope you found this review useful. If you have, please do click the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. You can also donate via Streamlabs or buymeacoffee.com if you'd like to help me do more of this sort of thing. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon here on Filbert Flies. Bye bye.